through the first phases of 65 spring. Have this here. Nothing exciting in the random events. People got some possibly interesting things. You know, I'll probably forget them though, but like I think this one is the National Resurgence, which allows Russia to get some more troops. That might keep them in the war a little longer and might be able to turn the tide here. Nothing exciting for France though. Got a Frontier Casus Belli, which, you know, if they can hold on to that until they recover, they could use that to get them into the next war. The biggie was the commercial. The loss of those French fleets, now they're being rebuilt, caused some openings for other powers. So we see some things shifted across here. I don't remember them all, but this Dutch fleet getting the wine there, that's new because the Brits moved into somewhere like the slave market here. It's just the margins changed a little bit. I kind of screwed up. I think I forgot to move a Dutch fleet that would have been available this turn. I'm not positive. It may have been flipped over. Anyway, yeah, I think it was flipped. It just came in online this turn. Nobody was able to make the double bonus this time. The Dutch structure has gotten too large for them to get that advantage easily, and they didn't get good rolls on the money. You can see they lost a number of things. They've been getting pretty good. If they had gotten one more success, they would have been able to pay double instead of increasing their structure if they chose. But with their commercial structure of 12, they need 24 bucks, and, well, they were close to that, but not quite. So they went to try to get another ship. They did not get it. That's actually, that's a warship there. They should have it stacked with the other warships, because that is available. All right. Anyway, we're going to the diplomacy, and this is going to be kind of complicated at this point, because we're pretty sure France does want out of their war. I don't think either of the other wars is liable to come to any kind of conclusion at this point. Okay, so for the peace phase, let's take a look at what the Spanish-Swedish-French war is devolving into. There might be a demand over on the Russian-Polish front as well, simply for the sake of one side may be trying to drive the morale of the other lower, the prestige points lower than the other. But at this point, I think the Swedish-Spanish have made a decision. So you have several different types of peace that you can do. And the first thing to look at is what the military situation is. You're going to count up territories controlled. Now, the Spanish have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because that's a capital, areas that they've taken from France. And that's divided by 2 rounded up is their peace differential, I think. Let me see. Oh, no. Just the 5 is. The colonial capture doesn't count for anything, although that can be demanded. So, obviously, I'm not terribly interested in the status quo, the white peace, the compromise. Those allow both sides to impose demands on the other. And really, they're just different ways of expressing what essentially works out to be a white peace. Some of the things in something like EU or EIA allow you to kind of, hey, we'll have a limited peace or a white peace, but we'll stipulate these other demands that we'll take care of after the peace has been settled. Instead of that, this game handles it all within the peace, which makes it more complicated. And this gives you kind of the capability to make those negotiations within the peace framework itself, so that you can exchange territories, or well, not territories, but you can exchange a territory but give grants to the person who's essentially the loser of the war as well. I think a surrender is probably too extreme. France could do that. But alternatively, the Swedish-Spanish can also make an application. Now, actually, France probably will offer a surrender to begin with. This means that the other alliance gets to make one, and it works the same way. They're really the same thing. The victorious peace and the surrender are really the same thing in terms of what the effect is. It's just who initiates it. Well, the French went out of this war, so they're offering the surrender. So we had 5 peace differential points here, and that means we're going to get 1 plus 3, the 5 divided by 2, peace demands. That's 4 demands. The way I'm looking at it is, we may not want to make the full 4 demands, just because we're not really in that potent a position that we could afford. Of course, both sides will take a 3-point hit if we don't make the 4 demands. So, yeah, I think we'll make the full 4 demands, and I think the French will accept that, to tell you the truth. They just don't have enough power to keep this going. So what that's going to be is there's a territorial demand, but the problem here is I can't take hereditary regions of France unless I've got a claim on them. And if we flip through this, we know that Sweden has no claims on France. But their hereditary regions include France, for the most part. Roussillon is not. In fact, that may be something that the Spanish have a claim to. Let's see. Yes, they have claim to Roussillon, but they didn't capture Roussillon, so they can't demand that. So in terms of territorial demands, they won't be able to make any demands on France itself. But they can make a territorial demand for, well, they could demand up to 2 regions, 3 regions, but they can make a territorial demand for the colonial territory. So that's one of the 4. For prestige, that's probably something desirable. And the value would be split by agreement of the players. And we could also add a financial demand, which could be a major demand. I'm trying to remember what the restriction on that is. You can make major and minor demands, and I don't remember them. I'm going to have to look into this some more. I can't find anything that talks about the major and minor demands as being anything other than there's 2 types and you can kind of make either one. I think the major demand should count as a double cost demand. Which means, well, territorial seems to just be a singular choice. There aren't any. So the things that are going to help us the most are probably is free trade of interest to anyone. Neither the Swedes nor Spaniards are terribly interested in that, so they're not going to impose that. A military demand requires losing a quarter or a half of forces, so that's a pretty big. There's no political demand in place here. So we're looking at 3 or 4 demands, trying to work something out that France will accept. That's one of the things. This is a negotiation process here. You don't just say, I surrender, and then it's settled. It's, I surrender, okay, here's my offer. All right, I'll take it or not, and if you don't take it, you lose temporary prestige. Now, it's to the Spanish-Swedish side's advantage to take this because, well, when they get their temporary prestige back, they can only go up to 15. And they're already past that. Now, they're basically throwing away these points that they've got logged here. But if this is refused, both sides lose 3, or the winners lose 2 prestige, and the winners lose 2 and the losers lose 4. If this is refused, it goes into the temporary bank. That temporary bank is in the loser's advantage in a lot of ways because they have a lot of ground to catch up. So if they can bank some in there, so to some extent it's worthwhile to provide a good piece to your opponent, one that they're willing to accept, so you can negotiate this out. So I'm looking at a territorial demand for 1 to give someone this island. Now that's clearly of more value to Spain than to Sweden in a lot of ways, but Sweden's trading in the Sugar Islands. As long as they hold that, they would have a guaranteed foothold there. They're not going to get any taxation off of it or anything. Prestige demand is clearly of some value. But so is financial. So the question is, how do we split the other 3 or 4 demands? Okay, so I think I've come up with my decision, which is a territorial demand transferring Port-au-Prince to the Swedes, a double financial demand, where they're each going to get a year's worth of income, and then a prestige demand, just normal, where the Spaniards actually are going to get 2 of the 3 prestige that's granted. France will accept this because one of the things is, if they don't accept it, Sweden or Spain could start laying claim to some of these territories. That's kind of their threat is, well, if you're not going to accept that, I don't have to offer a victorious peace. We could keep this going. We're making good points off of it. You're not. You're going to just keep falling. And we could strip away some of your home country, which we can't do right now. Or we could focus on taking Roussillon and take two pieces of territory. So I think this is an acceptable piece. The problem is the financial demand is particularly poorly written for this game. The resulting amount is a debt. It must be paid within 3 years after the peace treaty. Not 3 turns, 3 years, okay? So let's say we went to general peace here. Well, if we didn't make it, the debtor power is considered bankrupt. So given that there's war turns going on, that money is likely to be able to be generated within 3 years. But if there wasn't a war going on currently, if we were moving into a peace turn, the chances of bankruptcy become much, much higher. Then again, there are these weird little situations where war turns are different from peace turns for everyone involved in a way that kind of makes the game not seem natural. There's some unnatural behavior in EU based on the length of the turns, but some of that can be explained due to weather or some other things. There may be some other factors that play in, but this is very disturbing how this kind of interlocks. It just doesn't work right. And like, not explaining what major and minor peace demands do, which I can't find any explanation of. This is going to be problematic. And now I'm going to write those peace demands into here, and we have, after we take effect of that, we'll have these points. So now, what was I saying? 1, 2, 3 off for France, 2 in favor for Spain, 1 for Sweden. We'll be getting a little Swedish marker up there in Port-au-Prince, and then we've got the money to change. But then the next thing that happens is all of these reset to prestige. Now, that doesn't help the Swedes or the Spanish, but it does generate some prestige for the French. That's the temporary prestige losses there. The Swedes and the Spanish are above 15, so they can't get there. So I'll write those peace conditions down, and then I'll go over and see, what kind of negotiation whatever is taking place for whether there's a Russian, Polish, or even maybe a Turkish, Austrian, but I don't see that either side feels like it has the clear advantage in that war. This war, I think the Poles feel like they have enough of an advantage that one side or the other may offer the white peace or something just to try to drive both sides down. The problem, of course, is the Poles are already doing quite well. So that could drive Russian victory points down to an unsustainable level, whereas the Poles can afford to lose some because then they have room to gain more or something. I don't know. Other potential peace that's in the offering, Poland and Russia actually have an interesting situation. If we look at the victory conditions, if I can dig them up for this scenario, Russia wants either Smolensk or Bryansk, and Poland wants the Ukraine. They both get points for that, which means a status quo victory condition could allow them to actually exchange territories. That would be largely to Russia's disadvantage in the sense that they're losing a 2-point area versus a 1-point area. Another option would be the compromise, in which Poland makes a demand for the Ukraine, but Russia would get some other concession on their hands. Both of these are appealing. So I'm going to contemplate those a little bit, and I'll be doing that with some die roll. This is actually acceptable to both. Russia got the first option to make a peace proposal. They made the status quo, which allows them to each exchange. So, indeed, the Ukraine is going to be exchanged for, say, Smolensk. Now, here's the issue with this, though. That wouldn't be allowed if these were considered hereditary regions. Luckily for Poland and Russia, their hereditary regions are actually quite small. Poland's is really the Polish core, not including the old Lithuanian territory. And Russia's are really a North Russian area, so they don't have to worry about this at all. So both sides are able to do this, I guess, and that's gonna I forgot about the financial demand. France actually went down 2 more prestige from that, and we had 1 more for the winners, which I'm going to give to Sweden. I don't feel like Sweden's gain of the port, the colony here, was really of any great value, so that kind of evens out their position. Okay, but here it's 1 pp plus 1 pp per region, worth a half of, or 1 tax, 2 pp per region, worth 2, with a total of with the total going in both directions. So Poland would gain for Ukraine and lose for that. The net effect is that Poland is going to gain 1, which they can't get, and Russia is going to lose 1. So there is still some prestige effect there. But then what we end up with is this moves down to between Bryansk and the Ukraine, and these come here, and then we withdraw units outside of, back to national territory there. Political posturing, France ended up picking up Savoy from the Spaniards, which I think means they have to push out. Actually, probably just have to move out. Hanover, Sweden managed to strip it, I think, from Prussia. They didn't get it, but they took it out of their hands. Someone got Venice. Spain picked up Venice. One of the biggies in terms of actual effect on the game, the Turks got Morocco to enter the war against Austria. So now they can use their naval power to ship some troops over, just some additional forces into play that they don't have to pay so much for. And we move to the royal phase. The economic phase in this game is painful as hell. Basically, and there's a lot of things in this that are, but basically, you count up, you have to look up things like your public debt, pay your interest on that, etc. Now you could say, well, isn't EU more complex? Yeah, it is, but you've got this spreadsheet or this tax form essentially that you fill out, and it's pretty easy to manage. Because all the information's in one place. Here, hunting through the rules to find the different places. Even after I get used to the game, I'll probably end up just forgetting things more than anything else. So, you count up you look at the public debt, you pay that. You have to worry about, hey, did you pay a pension or something? Do you have to roll a die for that to pay the cost for that every turn? Did you happen, then you count all your units. If you've got units at sea, they cost more than units elsewhere. And then beyond that, you have to look up, see how many units can I recruit each turn. Again, not in some simple place. In EU, it's always in one place. Although I bet you the recruitment's actually on here somewhere. I don't see it. These Turkey should have a 5 somewhere that they're allowed to recruit, and I'm not seeing that. And beyond that, I may have screwed up already with the mercenaries. Mercenaries, you have to pay. I think you have to pay for them no matter where they are if they're going to be in supply, which is going to be kind of problematic. Like, I thought they were the good deal. It turns out they're not the good deal. You kind of need to, and I'll worry about that next turn because I'm just coming to that conclusion this turn. Regular units, as long as they're in their home location, don't pay any cost. But otherwise, you have to pay a maintenance fee on your units. Well, not just the maintenance for the units. You have to pay the maintenance for the units, but you have to pay maintenance to keep them in supply, or else you make a supply roll. But I don't think there's a supply roll here in the general peace phase, so the mercenaries are free as long as you're in general peace. But if you're not, you have to worry about, okay. Things like the depots and the artillery don't cost you anything. The difficulty in figuring out, hey, can I build a new navy is kind of a pain in the ass. There's just so many little pieces of this that there isn't one good little reference that I see. Maybe there is that I, haven't run across yet, and maybe never will because it's in French, in one of the sheets. But like with a lot of things in this game, to get it into a place where you can play it fairly easily, I think you need that kind of support that EU just provided you. Yes, there are a lot of tiny little things to forget in EU, but they're tiny things. They're not the basic core of the game. So that's kind of a little weird. Anyway, I made it through the economic phase. One of the things you want to do in the economic phase is, I guess, you want to spend all your money, or else save a lot. Because if you end up with like $1 left, you're automatically going to lose it. We're also seeing some recovery happening in the countries that have left war now. Now we're getting into the military phase. We've only got one war going, but other people have to pull stuff back. So like the Swedes have to pull their armies back and try to figure out where they belong. Now this guy is fine on his own because there's only one of them. Oh yeah, there's another little special rule. Now this is an EU style special rule. Spain can build one navy per turn in Cuba. I don't know if that means that they can add to their structure. That seems unreasonable. But they can build it for just £1, which is cheap no matter what. So if they take naval losses, they can recover. The hard part here is going to be remembering to move all my units and try to spread them out and get them where they are happy and can be fed. That's a problem. So somebody like France can spread their mercenaries out. There's a lot of France, and a lot of the spaces will hold 2 armies, so I can fit everybody in there. But someone like Holland with only 2 spaces, he's got a couple of mercenaries. He's going to have a hard time maintaining those. Some of these other armies, Russian, Polish, well, all their feudal units. Now, I'm only taking the Russian feudal units with an F on them. Everything in Russia is feudal, but you get the right numbers for the scenario if you take the Russian legitimate feudal units off board. So the regular Russian army is going to be treated as a regular army, except it's cheap to build, and that includes the mercenaries, I guess. I don't know. And it's got feudal morale. The Poles, on the other hand, though, are trying to rebuild their own little tiny, rather decent army, for whatever value that is. The morale's not, I don't know. I don't know how important it is, because you don't want to take losses once you're past your morale level. But quite often the battle is decided on that first die roll. But maybe it wouldn't be if you're facing, say, Swedes against Russians or something. Maybe the Swedes are going to win every battle just by sticking around. They may take significant losses, but they're going to force the Russians back each time. The spring turn was not a good one for the Austrians. Most of the powers pretty much kind of spread out their force. Probably ought to move these cannons back. Into positions basically where they were sustainable, because now I realize what those rules are. So now you see the Prussians kind of all spread out, two per space. It's even worse for Holland than I thought. Zeeland is only a starred an asterisk space, which means only 1 stack can be there. The Turks did a pretty good number on the Austrians. They won 2 battles. One up here and one down here. They didn't get a fight here. And then the Austrian, this is a damn depot, and it's so slow moving. It helps my ability not to suffer attrition, but it really hurts my ability to actually act and operate efficiently. This force marched in with an intention to attack, but it took a couple of losses due to attrition, and I decided not to. Anyway, now we have 18 points for the Turks and only 9 for the Austrians. And it's looking kind of iffy for them. They may be very interested in acquiring those Prussian mercenaries to see if they can turn the tide in this battle. They have a better economy. If they can start to hit the Turks, even though the Turkish troops are cheaper, they could turn this around. But they got hurt pretty bad this turn. Okay, so after a little bit of repositioning, the Swedes pulling some of their forces back to where they are in supply. The Turks actually had the advantage, but they allowed the Austrians to go first. The Austrians kind of bungled things, and the Turks are pushing forward. You can see they've got Vienna under siege. They've got Schlesien, Silesia. They've taken Moravia already. They've taken all of Hungary, and in 2 turns, or in another next turn, this should fall, if I can remember that. The Austrians were allowed to retreat through Venice's territory to get back to Istria. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to retreat safely. Remember, the retreat rules are kind of weird. You're allowed to retreat through minors in some cases, but yeah, it's looking pretty bad for Austria. They're down to 7, and Turkey's at 20. I think Turkey can basically take a maximal piece in this circumstance, but they're not going to gain much. The question is whether Turkey's willing to accept a peace or if they want to just keep fighting until they get Vienna, because that's their big goal. If they don't, well, we're getting close to the end of this period. So there's kind of a desire for total war here from the Turkish point of view. And it's going to be tough for Austria may have to turn and find someone to help them with the siege of Vienna. I'm not sure if anyone has any political reason to do so. Obviously, the Poles historically came in, but I don't see anyone who cares about it, to tell you the truth. So the real question is, well, obviously they can get a Prussian army to help them from the king, making the electorate king. But who else is particularly interested in stopping the Turks? Are they doing all that well? You know, it's early in the game. This is the thing. In an EU game, if the Turks are doing well enough that they can challenge Vienna, they're doing very well, and other people are interested in coming in. Plus, Poland's neutral in that and will sort of automatically come in if called. But here, this is the beginning of the game. Who cares? So it kind of, there's a lot of time for this to expand over. If this was just the early scenario, yeah, maybe. Roll here to the end of the 65 turn into 66. Nobody died in the life phase. The victory point phase, well, got our collections. Poland's at 88 in the lead. At the bottom, obviously, France at 51. But the interesting thing is Turkey. Right now, because there's a war going on, they have a good chance of staying at the top of their game. So they're at plus 20 each turn. A lot of incentive to keep this war going for them. Not just because of the points that they're getting, but because they want something specific. So basically, I think it's going to be pretty hard for Austria to surrender to them early. It feels like I still am packing a lot into each war year here, so I'm going to load this one up separately. Yeah, they're only, a half hour or so, but that's still a fairly long video to cover, and I'm kind of slowing down in my playing, getting hooked on video game again, just because there's a certain avoidance factor. The effort involved in this is exceeding the interest that the game presents. It doesn't give the kind of view that an EU does. It's still more interesting than, some kind of very loosely designed game. I'm thinking here kind of like, ooh, shit. There's sort of a fantasy game called Soldier Kings that is loosely based on the 7 Years' War technology. It was a GDW game. I'm looking for it. There it is down there. Soldier King, sorry. Soldier Kings is... My recollection was that it was too light as well. That's the Markham design up here. But that at least had some significant historical byplay in it. Soldier King is a complete fantasy world. I mean, it's just the technology of this fantasy world happens to be represented as 7 Years' War. It uses a system similar to A House Divided. And in fact, how bad Soldier King was kept me from ever wanting to buy A House Divided, but some people seem to really like it for so many years that I picked that sucker up, and it is a good little light game with a little bit more detail than Soldier King has. Anyway, this has more detail than that, more historical veracity and everything, but man, the effort involved in playing this one, largely a matter of organization, but also some of the component effects, not enough player aids and such not, and of course the language barrier in terms of some issues. But I'm feeling the bigger thing has to do with organizational issues. All right, let's